The babies have figured out how to beg too now. Hey ho, I'm Rachel, this is Missy, and we're Miss Daisy Sewing, and today we're going to go on a new quilting adventure. It's been quite a while since I did a quilt on this channel. I think the last time was my mum's tropical quilt, which was very well received. The fleece backing has made it her go-to quilt in the colder months, and I think she and my oldest niece, who stays with her because of college, are basically fighting all the time over it. So I don't think you can get higher flattery than that. But this time it's going to be a series of quilts, one for my sister, one for my youngest niece, and one for my youngest nephew. They have requested new quilts because their current quilts are effectively constantly in use. They love them and use them all the time, and my sister, for the sake of laundry, would like to be able to rotate the quilts. And I'm going to use that opportunity to kind of do something more up to date with who my niece and nephew are now, as children are prone to do. They've grown up a bit, their interests have changed from their original quilts. And today we're going to start on my niece's quilt. She has got really into oceanography and sea creatures as of late, which, seeing as I studied marine biology, is something I can totally get down with. So that's been really fun actually for me on the outside to watch develop as an interest. So my plan is going to be a jellyfish inspired quilt with a cheeky siphonophore on the back, but we'll get to that when we get to that. First of all, let's design the top of the quilt with those jellyfish, and what we'll do is we'll just hop over to the notepad and I'm going to explain what I'm hoping to do. So the plan for today, we are going to go with a sort of between a double and a king size. The kids don't need a full king size bed, but I like big snuggly quilts. So I'm aiming for minimum a double, but probably slightly bigger. I tend to aim bigger with quilts because for some weird reason, even though I try and make all of the strips the same size, you end up with some slightly smaller. So if I go big and then when I trim it into a proper rectangle, it'll still definitely be over the double. For this one, I want to do a gradient of light blue to dark blue, maybe grey, but really dark. So I want a light to dark gradient, and I want to do a sort of fun block, maybe a sort of like the sort of one where it's like half the diamond and then like the little stripes or something like that. Something fun to sort of give that gradient, but also have that sort of dappling effect that you have when you're underwater looking up. So I don't want just like stripes. I want it to be sort of mottled mosaic. And then on top of that, I'm going to do some applique jellyfish, and that'll be a sort of freehand applique because I want loads of different sizes of jellyfish. And then I'm going to top stitch down like the ribbons and really give this loads of texture and make it feel really organic is the rough plan on this one. So jellyfish will be in pink. I'm not too worried about a realistic jellyfish. I want them to feel not cartoony. So they will be pink, and I'll probably use like ribbon and maybe just like, I can't remember the name of it, where you basically like stitch down yarn. I'll remember the name for that, just to create lots of texture on these tentacles. And that's the plan. I'm not going too ambitious with this. I think the colours, the pop colours, and the textures are going to talk for themselves. So I'm not going to go anything too crazy. Like I said, I want to use up tons of blues, light to dark, and then our jellyfish on top. I had a quest in the loft and I'm really pleased with the gradient I've managed to get from all of the fabric stashed up there. I've got some really pale colours up at the top, and then we're going down to the grey. I don't really want to go darker than grey at the bottom and the front of the quilt. So yeah, the plan will be sort of like where I've got the two colours side by side, there's sort of an equal colour palette. like in terms of saturation. So bright to dark. So, and I need to figure out what quilt block I want to do to get that sort of mosaic, underwater, dappled light look.
I will invest in a rotary cutter one day, I promise.
So I've got a bunch of 5-inch strips cut. I'm going to turn these into squares. Now I've got loads more grey and loads more of this aqua than what I've cut here, but I'm going to sort of see how things pair up as I cut these into squares.
All jokes aside, a rotary cutter is on my Christmas list.
So that's everything cut and stacked. I've got sort of colour coordinated for the stripes, for how I'm going to pair them up. But you can already see that gradient, which I'm really pleased with. And for those interested, the stack here is about 15, maybe 16 centimetres tall. So got a lot of squares to sew, which is our next step.
Now this might seem counterintuitive, but the way these squares are assembled is that the first step is that we sew all the way around all 4 sides of the square, completely sealing it. It was at this point that I started to regret going with 5 inches for the squares rather than something larger. And that was because the next step in this block is to cut all of those squares into little tiny triangles going from the diagonal. You can see that I'm marking a cross on each of these squares and then using that as a guide to cut with my scissors. Trust me, you don't want to know how long this took. Thankfully, I've got a good podcast I'm listening to.
So I've got here all my little baby squares. If I open one up, you can see it's about 3 inches square. I'm doing a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so that's going to go down to about 2.5 when it's finished. I did the quick check and a double quilt is 79 inches square, meaning I need to have the quick math moment. So I'm going to need to have 32 of these in a row. So I suppose my first step is counting how much I've got of each and working out roughly where I want that light point coming from, because I think I might have it sort of down the middle, having these lighter squares sort of coming down the middle and then the darker ones filling around the edge. But we'll have a play and see what happens. So I've pressed everything, and that did take quite a while. I also did the homework tallying how much everything I made, and I have 733. So not quite enough to do a 32 by 32. Looking at the math, I can get away with a 27 by 27 grid, which is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do a really wide border around the outside to bring it up to that 79 inches square that we want. Yeah, I'm just running out of blue and running out of steam at this moment in time, so I just want to get on with this project and not cut and make more squares. The next part of this is going to be roughly organising it so that we've got a light direction and we don't just end up with like 2 rows of light at the top and then loads in the dark at the bottom. So we're going to just try and spread it out a little bit.
I decided I wanted to actually start pairing things just to make that mapping out of the background easier by making there be less pieces.
So I got a new thing, obviously not sponsored. I have managed to break my poor necky, and yeah, I had to get a new machine. Thank goodness for Black Friday sales. That's all I'm going to say. This one is a bit different. So previously I have burned out the motor on 2 sewing machines and broke the belt on a 3rd. So that's why I moved into heavy duty machines, partly because they are physically heavier than your standard sewing machine, and for the quilting I do like that extra weight, but also because I am just really hard on sewing machines. Like, I use them way more than your sort of hobbyist hemming the curtains once a year kind of sewing machine. With the necky, I actually knackered the bobbin, the top bobbin bit. The part that controls the tension for the lower bobbin thread has sheared off. And the way that happened is that the thread from the top managed to wrap round the bobbin a bunch. And then as I've had to try and take all of that thread out, it's just caught on it and it just a little bit pinged off. I can sort of fudge it and sort of force it to work by wedging the tension piece in with the bobbin itself, but I'm not getting a consistent tension. And like I said earlier, I sew all the time. Like, this is the kind of level of a hobby where just kind of fudging things along isn't really ideal, especially because I want more professional finishes on my stuff. So, yes, thankfully, Black Friday has come along and I got this nice new Singer Heavy Duty. So, I'm going to get this unboxed and set up and have a play with it, and hopefully, this one will last for a couple of years. I think I got. Well, the necky turned up at COVID, so I got 5 years out the necky. So I'm hoping to get similar at least out of this, which isn't too bad when you think about it. So yeah, let's get this set up and we will get pushing back on with all of these squares.
Sewing machines these days are literally plug and play. So after I unboxed it, checked that the cover that I had made previously fitted, which, let's be honest, is the most important thing, I was straight away back onto those squares, and I'm pleased to confirm that this machine works just fine. It's actually much quieter than the necky, so I'm not going to complain about that. Once everything was paired, I was then able to get them put into groups of 3 or 4 and start the process of trying to lay out how I wanted this quilt to look for the background.
So I've made a start on the bottom part, and then kind of gave up with the top section because I'm running out of space. What I'm going to do is put together those first sort of 3 rows and then sort of start slowly building up from there. And not only will it give me some more space, but it will help with sort of sizing and things like that. But looking at the early vision, this is going to look amazing, because this is the bottom, the dark is the bottom, and we're going to slowly graduate up to the light. And I think this is going to come together really nicely. That's all the rows done. Makes it a fabulous little scarf. So, and I need to press all of these, and then I will attach the rows together to make the quilt.
I'm not gonna lie, everything about this project was just #aesthetic. After pressing all of the pieces, I then went on to sewing all of the strips together to make that back piece. And this is when I realised how well it had come together. I had captured that dapple effect I was after and got a really nice artistic gradient. But the scene needs its jellyfish. Whilst I was busy assembling all of those rows, I set the embroidery machine off with this lovely little repeating heart motif so that I could have some texture for the bottom of my jellyfish. Gotta admit, really pleased with it so far. I've got my gradient that I wanted, and I just love the colours. I think it really does give underwater vibes, even without the key sort of piece of the jellyfish on it. My next step is going to be to add a border. So I've got some this blue still, and I'm going to use a bit of this sort of tealy colour as well. And I'm going to bring in some of the pink now for the jellyfish. So you'd have seen earlier in the video, I've got my sort of embroidered pieces. So I want to bring some of this pink into the border as well, just to sort of try and make it more cohesive altogether. So yeah, we're going to get the border on, and then we get to play with the jellyfish, because they're the fun bit. I mentioned at the start of the video that my niece is into marine life in general, so why have I gone for jellyfish? The answer is basically that I think they're really cool. They're a type of cnidarian, which derives from the Greek word meaning sea nettle, and they belong to the same family as sea anemones and coral.
So these are the embroidery pieces,
And what I'm going to do is trim them into a sort of kind of half dome sort of shape like that. So this will be the bottom of the jellyfish. Need to trim off the jump strings. And then what I'm going to do is basically make a sort of front and a back. So around the top and the bottom. And as I sew the bottom, I'm going to catch in a bunch of different threads and things that I've got. And these are going to make the tentacles of the jellyfish. I really like these sort of translucent ones that I've got here. I've got some sort of coppers as well, which I think will be fun. And just different normal like weights of pink. So I'm going to just play about and see what works for me. I've got enough here to make 8 jellyfish. I don't know if that's too many. So we're just going to sort of go one at a time and play about with some placement before I assemble the jellyfish. Despite their name, jellyfish are 95% water. They don't have a skeleton that's made up of bones, but rather they have bells containing fluid and circular muscles. So they just inflate these bells with water, and that's what allows them to move. They don't have brains, hearts, or lungs either. Instead, they're just made up of 3 layers. The outer epidermis, which is like a skin, a gelatinous middle layer called the mesoglia, and finally the inner gastrodermis, which is what lines the gut cavity and allows them to digest food. And jellyfish are predators. They eat small fish, fish eggs, plankton, and even other jellyfish. So I've gone with less jellyfish, but I think less is definitely more with this. It's going to let the tentacles sort of do their thing. Yeah, really pleased with this so far. Actually, it's looking really nice. Jellyfish are ancient and have existed for over 500 million years, which makes them older than the dinosaurs. Whilst most jellyfish are short-lived, some surviving only a few hours, others a few years, the most infamous is the immortal jellyfish. This species has learned how to cheat its biological clock, and in times of stress can revert back from the adult medusa stage to the juvenile polyp stage. So that's the bodies of the jellyfish on. But what I'm going to do is actually hand stitch these ribbons down instead of machining them, because it was really awkward doing these, and I think doing these on the machine is going to be a bit of a nightmare. So I'm going to seal all of the ends here, just to stop them fraying. And then I'm just going to do like a little running stitch just to sort of pin these down. And I think it'll help me get a really more organic shape if I do it by hand. But yeah, that's the next step. Winter is a nice time to make quilts, because even without batting and an after quilt or the back of the quilt, this does get pretty cozy. And sometimes the only way to finish the part you're on is to get under the quilt. So definitely prefer doing quilts in the winter. That's my pro tip for you all. Quilts best made in winter. But yeah, I'm going to go pop on a podcast or some sewing vlogs and just push on with this. Because once these are down, that's the top of this quilt done. And then we'll be able to get onto the back of the quilt. So looking forward with it. Making really good progress so far and just pleased with it. Like, I think this looks absolutely beautiful. I have sent some sneak peeks to some people, and yeah, really pleased with how this one's come out. So really excited to get this finished and get the full vision. For this part I used long tacking stitches. It allowed me to get a more organic shape with the ribbons by being more flexible, and also even neater finish because there wasn't as many visible stitches on the ribbons. One jellyfish down. So one of the reasons I put the border in early was that I really wanted these to come off into the border, and I am so pleased with how that's looking at the moment. But yeah, one down, 3 more to go. Let's talk about siphonophores, the ocean giants you wish you'd never heard of. I was shocked when my niece mentioned siphonophores. They're not really an animal per se, but more of a colony of specialised, genetically identical individuals called zooids. Think the biological version of the Borg, I suppose. The Portuguese man of war is probably the most famous siphonophore, and being most commonly mistaken as jellyfish, it's unsurprising that they are related. At over 40 metres in length, the giant siphonophore is the largest thing in the ocean. Granted, it's only the width of a broomstick, but this thing is a bioluminescent monster. Like, who needs to go to space to find these crazy things? And here I am making what I call the sandwich. So I've got the bottom, the batting, and the top of the quilt all together. And the first thing I do is run a long running stitch all the way around it before I then put on the actual border piece. And this just helps stop things moving around. It's looking good. I really like the contrast for the border. So the plan is going to be to hand stitch down. So I'll just basically fold that like that to keep the raw edges out of the way, and then stitch that down like that, and we'll get a lovely border. Remember what I said about quilts in winter months? This is exactly the reason why, and I really made good progress on this until a certain distraction happened. Are you comfy, sweetie? Are you comfy? Oh, bless. Are you happy now? Are you happy now?
Someone's attention seeking tonight.
I keep seeing people do these drops of quilts, but this was that big I had to stand on the sofa for the full effect. I am so pleased with how this came out. It's probably the most artistic quilt I've ever made, and I absolutely adore how that gradient for the sun coming through the sea has turned out. The cheeky little siphonophore on the back is just a fun little in-joke for my niece and I, but the real showstoppers are those jellyfish on the top. My niece now has received this quilt, and I am pleased to say that she was as delighted with it as I am. So, we've got another 2 quilts in this series, and I will see you shortly for round 2. Until then, bye!